Day, and welcome to Create Your Best Life with Rex. I'm your host, Rex Sykes, and we've got another great show for you today. I'm going to tell you about my guest, and I'm very excited to have her with us. Her name is Alana Sharps, and she's an inspirational speaker, an international best-selling author, an empowerment advocate renowned for her powerful story of self-discovery, resilience, and transformation. She authored Was It My Fault? An Abuse Survivor's Story and Guide for Navigating Narcissistic Red Flags. She has touched countless lives through her book and through her offerings of education and inspiration, and provides hope to those navigating similar struggles. Her message resonates deeply, reminding us that no matter the obstacles, transformation and triumphs are always within our reach. Alana founded Sir Thrive Tribe, and you'll see that in a little bit, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. But she founded Survive Thrive, and she's a high conflict divorce and child custody consultant. Having navigated through the complexities of a toxic marriage herself, entwined with psychological abuse, Alana emerged as a committed advocate for those facing similar trials. And so if you or anyone is going through that, then turn them on to Alana and have them watch this show as well. Her story is one of transformation from a victim to empowered, and it fuels her dedication to guiding others through strife. So I'm going to bring Alana up. We're going to say hello. Alana, hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's so good to have you here.
I am happy to be here.
Excellent. So that's, quite an introduction, a bio, of somebody who's come, from the dark into the light, and now you're helping other people, go through, similar struggles to get through to the other side. So could you share with us a little bit about who you are, whatever you want to share about your journey in this way and your story, and then we'll talk, about other things too, like your book and stuff. But right now, tell us more about you.
All right, absolutely. So I was married to a very emotionally abusive and verbally abusive man for 16 years. And during that time, I actually did not know that I was being abused because unfortunately I had someone in my past during my childhood who spoke to me and treated me very similar. So it was normal for me. It wasn't until I saw my ex-husband assault my oldest son that I realized that my children were in danger as well. And that is when I decided that I needed to leave the relationship. When you leave an abusive relationship, a lot of people think you left the abuser, everything is done. However, when you are dealing with someone who is used to power and control, those dynamics bleed into the legal system. And so they try to exert power and control over you through legal abuse, financial abuse, counter-parenting, and lack of co-parenting, so to speak. And that is something that I encountered. I didn't know what was happening. I felt like my lawyer didn't understand what was going on. Family and friends tried to help, but they'd never been in this situation. So their advice didn't apply to someone who is dealing with an abusive person. So after I got through my divorce, got through my child custody battle, I decided to educate myself so that I could help others in similar situations, let them know the signs, all of the red flags I missed, as well as how to deal with these different situations when they're in it so that they can be educated, unlike I was, and not make all of the mistakes that I made during that time.
Would you say that that it's fairly common to people who are going through, they discover they're married to a narcissist or an abuser or someone with a problem, whether it's an addiction problem or some behavioral, emotional, psychological problem, that it's frequently the case that they have others in their background?
I would say yes. After I left and I started going through therapy, that is when I realized that I had someone in my past, in my childhood, who treated me the same way, which led me into the relationship that I was in. And just doing my own research and my own reading, I've read that it's very common that if you have someone in your past, your childhood, who treated you a certain way, then it becomes normal for you. You normalize that. So when you meet people like that as an adult, you don't see the signs, the red flags that this is this person is not healthy for you.
Well, it's also true that so many of us just are very patterned. We live uh, out of habits that we grew up with, and sometimes that includes less than glorious circumstances, but also less than glorious people. And people will say, I married the same person 5 times or 3 times, whatever the number is, or I keep, encountering the same difficulties. That's not because the other people out there are looking necessarily for you, but that you or I are attracting those people because that's what we know from our past. And then we get involved with them and we don't always recognize it until something maybe dramatic happens.
You're exactly right. And once I went through therapy and I realized that, I was determined not to attract that type of person again. I wanted to heal myself so that I could see a healthy relationship versus, an unhealthy relationship.
Oh, that's awesome. So, are there any tips? I hate to put it in that because it sounds like here's a tip, but are there any guidelines, any um, danger signs, any alerts, anything that a person should maybe reflect on or review in their own life or in their relationships to see whether or not they're like healthy or not healthy, or some way that they can assess where they're at?
Yes, I can tell you the signs that I missed. The isolation from friends and family, that's a huge one. I'm a very social person. I like spending time with my friends. I like spending time with my family. And subtly over time, my ex-husband started to complain about my friends and how much I spoke to them on the phone or if I was going to go out with them. So, in an effort to please him and not have to have an argument about the time that I spent with them, I slowly stopped spending time with my friends. I stopped being social and I started spending all of my time with him. Another thing is the slight name calling, right? And all of these are subtle signs. So it's not like these abusive people come out and they just, call you all kinds of names in the first or second week. They do this slowly over time. So a lot of times you miss it, especially if you're not looking for it. So he would call me certain things and then say, "Oh, I was just kidding," right? Laugh it off. And then if I felt a certain way about it, he said, "Oh, you can't take a joke. I was just playing. Why are you so serious? Why are you so sensitive?" Putting everything on me. The other thing that they like to do is control how you look, right? Your clothes, what you wear, what you do. Everything had to be centered around him and what he wanted. And over time, I just became a very different person. I became who he wanted me to be instead of who I was because I wanted to keep the peace. If I didn't do what he wanted, there was no peace in the home. I was sleep deprived because he would keep me up all night, causing an argument over something frivolous like, why was I on the phone for 15 minutes when I got home from work? I also couldn't think straight because I was sleep deprived, right? And when you can't think straight and you're trying to please someone, you don't think logically. So, should I had stayed in that relationship for 16 years, going through what I went through and putting my children what they went through? No. But at the time, I didn't see it as that. I saw it as I was going to break up a family. Even though that family was in chaos, I was still trying to keep that marital unit together. And I had people on the outside telling me I needed to keep that marital unit together as well. And then I was also trying to do the best that I can in survival mode. And I didn't realize this until after I got out of the relationship, but I was literally surviving in my relationship instead of thriving in my relationship because I had lost myself and my children had as well. So my kids were surviving in our family dynamic instead of thriving. We all survived in our own ways. So for my kids, my oldest son acted out a lot, and I thought it was just him being a kid. But no, this was a kid that was being abused, and he was behaving the only way that he knew how to express what was being done to him. My daughter internalized everything. She went inward. And so she started to suffer from anxiety and depression. And then she also had suicide ideation once she got into her teenage years. My youngest son, who was 11 by the time that we left the relationship, he became the people pleaser. So he would never make a decision. We still struggle with that today. He's almost 17 years old today. He doesn't like to make a decision because he's fearful that that decision will be the wrong decision. So what he tends to do is he'll ask you, what do you like, or what do you want, or what do you think, before he'll say what he wants or what he thinks, to make sure that everything is aligned. So that's how my kids survived. That's how I survived. And none of us knew that we were all surviving in that relationship. So those are very important things to look out, especially for in the children, because those kids, if you don't recognize the signs, they will carry those hurt feelings into adulthood and get into abusive relationships themselves, or they can become the abuser in a relationship.
I mean, you just listening to you, there's so many different questions I want to ask and comments I want to make and areas I want to explore. If we are conditioned growing up to be a victim, meaning all of us in some ways are, we're the product of our own mental habits and the people around us. And sometimes that means we don't do things that we otherwise would do because we're so used to not doing it. We don't know. It's kind of like we don't know what questions to ask because we've never asked them because no one said we should ever ask them. And then suddenly we find ourselves in a situation we don't have a program for it. So by default, we live out the programming that we know. I would submit that the same thing is true about the abuser, be that a man or a woman, be that an old person or a young person, that they have the same kind of mental habits and patterns, and they only do what they know to do, and that is to maybe manipulate, if we want to call it that, and to treat the people the way they treat. There's this saying, right, that men marry a woman hoping she will never change, and women marry men hoping to change them. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I mean, you can find enough evidence for it. But the point I'm getting at is that there are times when somebody, the very things that you described that could be abusive could be also loving. Somebody takes an interest in wanting to be with you and not to isolate you. They want to help you dress to look good for you and for them, not because they want to manage your clothes. You know what I mean? So there are the very same thing that can be really loving and kind can also be really scary and detrimental depending on the purpose behind it.
Correct. So you have to really look at how often does that happen? Does that happen on a regular basis within your relationship? Because if they're trying to be helpful, right, then they're going to coach you initially, but they should not be coaching you for 16 years.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fair point. Well,
Yeah.
and the other side to that is if somebody's a liar, a known liar, and I go through this a lot of times with people. There are people who say, I will do that. I will get that done. And then they don't. And I know some of these people, and so then another situation comes up, no, I'll get that done. And then they don't. And then the third time they come, I get that done. So pretty soon I don't ask. Because I know that they're going to say yes, and then they're never going to do it. There are those people who lie, they just lie no matter what. No matter how many times they say. So if you know that they lie to start with, why would you ever trust that anything they ever might say in the future is true? I mean, hopefully it would be, but the chances of it being, and same thing with abusers. If they have a pattern of abuse, it's likely they're going to continue to abuse, and their partners may change. It may go from, significant other, or spouse, or life partner, or whatever, to the children, or to someone's parents. But there's a pattern of that is. That if you or I were smart enough at the time, or wise enough, or had the experience, we might be able to notice it. But we too have filters, so we live we don't notice it until we're like, oh my God, this is really too late and too uncomfortable.
That's
And sadly,
exactly right.
some people are horribly abused physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and or even killed. So it's not something to take lightly.
Not at all. The disparaging comments, the berating, none of that is healthy. That's not a healthy relationship at all. You shouldn't experience any of that in a healthy relationship, and definitely not the power and control dynamics.
Well, and that is the really pretty much the crux. It's a power game. If there's the power and the control, it's one thing if people playfully kid or do things, or but if it's all done to manipulate and control somebody, like I win, you lose, zero sum kind of thing, then best to seek help.
Correct. And it's hard to seek help from a marriage counselor, right? Because abusive people know how to behave when it's important. So marriage counseling does not work. They are going to come in their persona that they show to the rest of the world, which is not the persona that you see behind closed doors. So in my instance, we saw 5 marriage counselors. Only one marriage counselor actually saw him for who he was, and he didn't like that counselor. So after a couple of sessions, we no longer went to that counselor because they weren't on his side.
This is an important thing because in my circle of influence, as somebody who was going through a problem with a significant person in their life, and the significant person was always blaming them and telling them that they were wrong and this was wrong and everything else. And so at some point, the person who is always the butt of the insult kind of thing, showed some of their mail, some of their letters, emails, whatever, to their therapist, and the therapist said, "You do realize the person is horribly narcissistic and really abusing you." And it was for that person, and suddenly the lights went on. Went, wow! All this time I thought I was the person. Everything they were telling me was accurate. But now it was, and fortunately that there were other people ultimately in a chain that were able to verify also that what the original therapist said. So it wasn't like it wasn't a one-off who just said, no, it's not you, it's the other person. 5 or 6 other people then later came out and said exactly the same thing. So it gave this person freedom to begin with, thinking, I'm not the problem. I have problems, but I'm not what this person is making me out to be. So it gave that person the freedom to change that mindset and the pejorative labels that person was wearing, but also to then claim their life back, to say, I now need to build back better and make sure this doesn't happen again, and make sure I find love, in which case that person did do that. So,
right. Yeah, the gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, I mean, it's psychological warfare. It wears you down over time. It wears you down and you just start to give in. It's like, yeah, okay, I must be the problem. It must be me. You start to believe that.
Well, also the other thing is when it's unrelenting. I mean, that should be a sign, right? I mean, in other words,
Yes.
if you go, I need a vacation from this, and the other person is not ever willing to, it just continues. And sometimes that continues, it could show up before a marriage, during a marriage, and even exist after the marriage and after the time people have divorced. You can still have, an abuser abusing somebody who's no longer in their life anymore. However they do it, they see them in a store, they create a problem, in a park, or they, email them nasty. I mean, or call them or whatever. There's some people latch on and don't let go.
Correct. Yep. Very true.
So this is good because some people should get what might the warning signs be. Now, on the other side of that, I would want to be careful that I don't go, here are the warning signs, and then have people misinterpret those warning signs, thinking there's a problem when there isn't a problem. Because I mean, I can see where that can happen too. So how do you help people differentiate between, I really do need some intervention or some help here, versus I don't?
Well, as far as my divorce coaching goes, by the time people come to me, they know they're in an abusive relationship. So they're not in the finding out phase. They already know, and they're trying to get through their legal process as easily as possible. I have had people reach out to me personally through social media or through friends and family that believe that they're in an abusive relationship, and just listening to their story, I can tell that yes, they actually are in an abusive relationship, because a lot of the signs and things that are said and done to them mirror my own experience. And what I recommend for those people to do is to see a trauma therapist, to start expressing what's going on in their relationship, to get another opinion instead of me imposing, yes, I think you're in an abusive relationship. I provide a listening ear. I validate what they're saying to me, because it's so important for an abusive person just to have someone listen. And it's very hard for them to come out and say, hey, I think I'm being harmed in my home, whether that's physically or emotionally. So they really need to just have someone listen to them and let them talk it out. So if you have someone come to you and they're expressing what's going on, and the first thing you say to them is, that's not abuse, or you're taking it wrong, or why didn't you leave sooner? You make them feel bad for even saying anything. They will probably never express what is going on in their relationship again. They'll conceal everything and keep everything inward, which is not healthy for them and not healthy for their kids if they have kids in the relationship. So it's very important, as someone listening to someone who is expressing, hey, I'm in a bad relationship, to be that listening ear.
That's a,
Validate their feelings.
no, that's an excellent point. What I also think, you're saying is listen. I mean, because a lot of people don't listen. They hear somebody say something, and before the person can even finish, they jump in with a remedy, or they jump in with that's not, you're blowing this out of proportion. They don't listen because they're curious to find out where it goes. They listen to then render an opinion. And if they aren't really open to what the other person is saying, and they dismiss something that shouldn't be dismissed, that should definitely be addressed, uh, they're not being helpful. I mean, the best thing you can do is listen, and then seek wise counsel in some fashion. I guess I would say,
Yes, definitely I always say, speak to a trauma therapist, like I recommended, a pastor, someone that you trust, that you feel okay opening up to, because you need a support system. You can't get through it by yourself. So you definitely need some type of support system to support you during that time. And also, you don't want people telling you you're in an abusive relationship. You have to see it for yourself. Because if any of my friends came up to me and said, Alana, and they did actually, Alana, this is not good. You're in a bad position. And I dismissed it. I just thought that, he was behaving that way because he had a bad day at work, or he had a bad week. I had excuses for him, which is the worst thing that you could do. But because I had, my brain was so traumatized and beat down emotionally that I couldn't even see through the trees myself. So, I made excuses for him instead of saying, you know what? Yeah, I am in a bad situation. So people have to come to that conclusion on their own. We can guide them, but we can't come out and tell them, hey, you're in a bad situation and you need to get out immediately.
That's a really good point, because sometimes people with the best intentions drive the person who should be getting help to not get help,
Mhm.
because they say you need help, and then the person goes, no, I don't. You know what I mean? I mean, we tend to, oftentimes we push back on things that aren't welcomed, and if we're not ready to hear it, and someone's telling us, say, what your problem is this, and you or I aren't ready to hear it, most likely we're going to say, well, no, you're full of crap, and I'll do it my way. It's kind of like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When the person is ready to recognize the situation that they're in, then they can better see it.
That's correct. Yep, their eyes have to be wide open. before you can start to give suggestions on the next steps that they should take as far as getting, a safety plan, putting a safety plan together to leave the relationship. They need to be ready.
So I also want to point out, anybody who's watching live, you can ask questions in the chat room, or you could comment. And if you're watching by replay, obviously you can't do that. You still comment. And if any of us, if Alana or I see, those, afterwards at YouTube or wherever the show is being, maybe be able to answer them. But I want to say that we live in a current affairs time and place in history where there's a lot of blaming going on and a lot of excusing going on. So blamers are blaming people, and then other people are making excuses, and the blamers might be excusing their blaming behavior, and there's a lot of hate and a lot of discord and a lot of you're wrong and a lot of name calling and all this kind of stuff that's happening. So what about the person who says, get over it? You're not being, because you kind of brought it up before, you're not being abused, you're making the whole thing up. It's not as bad. They're not your friends necessarily, but you know what I'm getting at? They're those people who will dismiss everything and go, nah, it's just not gonna, it's not happening. And we know some real famous examples of people who abuse people and brag about it, and then later when they're called on it, it's like, why are you bringing that up? I mean, and I would go, well, because the person has this history. Why would you ever think that the person isn't what the person has said? That, I mean, it's such a delicate area, and there's so many people have hot points about this, that just to get clear and to be able to get help and to know what to do and to recognize where you are can seem for one person just absolutely impossible. But you're here to say it's not. You can find help, and you can find relief, and you can wake up to the fact that the stuff is going on no matter what's going on around you. In other words,
yeah. I would say once you start second guessing yourself, you start second guessing your thoughts and your own feelings, that's a huge red flag, because you know what you heard and you know what you saw. And when that other person is telling you, like, you saw a red ball and they're adamant that the ball is black, a lot of times that's not you, that's them. But of course they're going to tell you you're wrong, right? And it's all your fault and everything and this and that. If you find yourself second guessing your thoughts and feelings on a regular basis with whoever you're with, that is a huge red flag. That is the gaslighting that is making you feel that way. That is someone who is emotionally manipulating you to get their way and to get you to behave a certain way.
So I want to be careful about this, because I want to put it in a kind of a political context, and I don't want to make it a political thing, but what we see is that people on one side, disagree with the other side, and they somehow never meet, and they both blame each other and accuse each other, kind of thing in a political arena, and they're not about to change their minds. I mean, in other words, this side could say blah 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 blah, and the other person goes blah 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 blah, and all they do is they come back with counter arguments, because they're not ready to give up their position. They're going to they end up defending where they're at rather than going, oh, that's interesting, maybe you're right. So if you're in an abusive relationship and somebody can't say, well, you have a point, maybe we should entertain that. If it's always their win and not you get to win, that should be a huge red flag.
That's exactly right. When there's zero accountability, and narcissists have no accountability, they are never wrong. It is always somebody else's fault or something's fault, never them. So zero accountability, someone that needs admiration all of the time, 24 hours a day, red flag.
Yeah, I just want to say, because, somebody may be watching, go, well, this is a woman's issue. Obviously, there's a woman and she's, mad at her man. And so, we're talking about it. But men are abused too, and men are, this is just as important for the man to watch from the position of being an abused spouse or significant other, whether they're in a male and male relationship or a female and male relationship, and as well as women. I mean, this is not something that is. I mean, while it does seem to happen a whole lot more to women than it does to men, and I could be very wrong about that, but I mean, it's an issue that affects everybody, is what I'm getting at. So don't, just because a woman and you and I are talking about it, it's not that it's your issue, not my issue. It's our issue.
Correct.
As people.
Yes, it's a people issue.
So this show is as relevant to men who might be going through it, and it's relevant to men who might be abusers, and it's relevant to those people who it doesn't apply to them, but it does apply to someone in their sphere.
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you about the book you wrote. Why did you write the book, and how can they get it? And what is the book about?
So my book started out as therapeutic journals. Once I left my marriage, I had so many things in my head that I just needed to get out. I started journaling, and I started journaling from the time I met my ex-husband all the way up until the time that I left. And once I started opening up to friends and family about what I actually experienced in my marriage, because I really had kept everything within myself for many, many years. I wasn't sharing because I was embarrassed, for one. I felt like a failure. But once I started opening up, people started asking me, how did I get out? What were the signs, like we were just talking about? And how was I going to start to rebuild my life? So I decided to turn my journals into a book to not only tell my story, but to educate through my story. So within my book, everything that is going on, from the gaslighting to the lying to the lack of accountability, berating, everything that happened in my marriage and how it all started and how it escalated, I'm putting red flags in my book. So my book is actually in color print, and I showed red flags on, hey, this is a sign that I missed. And then I educate not only someone that may be in an abusive relationship, but someone that may be a friend or family member on, this is what is occurring and this is why it's occurring. I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books by psychologists and therapists, and I took all of that information and I applied it to my story and put it in my book, because I really wanted it to be a guide for people. Because emotional abuse, we don't talk about as much as we do physical abuse. And emotional abuse, because it's mental, those scars take so much longer to heal than a physical scar does. So it's something that we really need to talk about and educate on, so that people can see the signs and get out of these relationships, because they're harming us as adults and they're harming our children during their developmental years. So it's a very important topic, and that's what I wanted to come through in my story.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What wow. I love the change, Thrive tribe, because so many people, I hate the term survivor.
Yes.
I'm a survivor of abuse. I'm a survivor of tragedy. I'm sure. While it may be accurate, you're still alive. I mean, you're living, and is that it somehow kind of keeps the whole thing in the forefront of your brain, as opposed to being able to release and let go and going, thank God I'm no longer in that position. And so it's going from survivor to thriver and being able to let go. So are there some tips or practices or principles in terms of people who have gone through this, and maybe they haven't read your book yet or whatever, but they're on the other side of an abusive divorce or a high conflict abusive relationship, or a high conflict divorce, or bitter custody battles and all that, and they're a couple of days away, or 6 months away, or 16 years away, and they're still hanging on to it. How do they let go, open up to thrive, instead of just carrying.
Surviving. Yep. My number one recommendation is always seek the trauma therapist because you have experienced trauma. Talk therapy is okay. I have yet to meet someone who's experienced trauma that said they healed through talk therapy only. A trauma therapist is trained to heal your body. They're trained to help you heal from the trauma. So that is always my number one recommendation. And number two is you have to want to heal and be better. You have to want to rebuild your life, right? Because if you don't, you're not going to have the drive to get better and you're going to stay stuck in that survivor, but I'm not really thriving mentality. So you have to get a trauma therapist. You also have to work on your body because trauma does impact your physical body. So getting a medical exam, finding out what's going on, what you need to fix, working out, whether that be yoga, Pilates, lifting weights, something that gets you moving your body because trauma lives in the body. So you have to remove that by doing body movement exercises to get the trauma out of your body, as well as working on how you eat, right? You probably didn't eat very well when you were in that abusive relationship, right? Because food wasn't a priority. So get into healthy eating habits, probably taking some vitamin supplements because your vitamin levels are so low. It's whole body healing. I sought a personal trainer. I went and saw a functional medicine doctor. I went and sought a trauma therapist. I did everything for my mind, body, and spirit in order to heal and rebuild. And that is how I was able to get on the other side.
Wow. I love that. A lot of people, for example, meditation.
Yes.
They're sitting and meditating, where people sit and they're silent and they're watching their breath, or they're lying down, or they're chanting, or they're visualizing, or whatever you want to call it. But there's also cathartic meditation where you vehemently move your body, or you shake vigorously, or you dance, with abandon. You do things to move the energy and to get it out and to allow it to, a free release and free expression, so that the whatever blockage you might have can now flow and resume and find healthy, find those healthy pathways. So the same would be true with what you're suggesting, is that there are some people think, it's, while it's true, it may all be in your head. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect everything else.
That is exactly right. And I'm glad you brought up meditation. That was huge for me as well. My functional medicine doctor actually recommended it because I couldn't sleep. I had been sleep deprived for so many years. I couldn't get my body back into a state to calm down enough to really let me rest at night. And the doctor kept saying, Alana, meditate, meditate, meditate. And I said, I don't want to meditate. I fought it for a long time. And finally she said, put an app on your phone, set the timer for 10 minutes. The app will walk you through the meditation. She said, do it for 7 days and let me know if you see a difference. And the first night I did the meditation with the timer, I got the best sleep I had had in 16 years. And I became a fan of meditation. I started meditating every night from that day on because it was so relaxing to my nervous system. Because, of course, my nervous system had been in fight or flight. I was still in fight or flight, even though I left the relationship. So it was calming down that fight or flight so that I could rest at night. And just it invigorated my body. So I recommend that to people as well. Meditation, and just put the app on your phone, listen to the prompts, and do what the prompts say, and you'll be fine.
Well, I also like the fact that your experience, you said, I won't do it. Then you did it and you went, wow, my first experience of it blew me away, that I got the best sleep. Now, that may not be the case for everybody, but the point is that it is certainly possible for everybody to have that experience somewhere in their journey.
Yeah.
And the willingness to finally do it and then have that experience that then you go, oh, wow, I could have been doing this all along. I went back to the gym. The reason I say that is I went back to the gym. I injured my spine. So I went back to the gym, getting back in shape and everything else. And I will go, wow, why did I wait so long? When I go and I do lift some weights and I walk out of the gym feeling the muscles, being expanded and oxygenated and everything else. I walked different, I moved different, so just a little bit makes a huge difference. And people that I think oftentimes think I have to do everything at once.
Right. And you don't. And you're right. You have to find what works for you. Meditation works for me. My daughter also diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Meditation does not work for her. She can't do it. So what she does to relieve stress is she does art. Art therapy works for her.
But you know what? In Japan, some of the meditative practices are art. It is calligraphy. It is pottery. It is raking the sand, gardens and things like that. I mean, so anything can be a meditation if you approach it meditatively.
Yes.
But we tend to think of meditation as, sitting in the lotus posture, looking blissful, and trying to, and that's why, we talked about the cathartic means. If your EMTs know this, if somebody's just been in a near accident, and the adrenaline is coursing through their body, and all the hormones and everything is, they will take somebody by the hand and they will walk them off down the street back and forth, and they hold their hand so they don't walk out in the traffic or something like that. But you can't tell them to sit down and get calm, because all those chemicals are surging through the body. So you have to process it. So some people can process it by sitting still, but other people have to dance, or they have to shake, or they have to pound a pillow, or they need to do something that busies them, in a way so that energy finds its relief.
Correct. Yep.
So that's fascinating. Well, okay, so let's go to the high conflict divorce, because I'm sure people are going through that, their custody battle, things like that. Any tips or suggestions or rules of thumb that they should know in going through something like that? Because half the country's been divorced at least once.
This is true. Yes. If you are coming out of a marriage or it's typically marriages, because that's where the legal pull comes in, that you have definitely gone through some type of abuse, power and control dynamics. Those dynamics will continue into the legal realm. It's just now they're going to try to abuse you through the legal system. That's going to come in the form of filing multiple motions against you, because anybody can file a motion. It's when you get to have to prove the motion that, it may get kicked out of court, but you still have to hire an attorney to fight that motion and go through the process of trying to, settle your case. If there are children involved, those children are going to become pawns, because that is the last piece of control that the abuser has over you. So they're not going to want to negotiate or collaborate on a child custody schedule. And if you already have a parenting plan in place, like I did, I actually tried to plan for this. I had a separation agreement with my ex prior to leaving the marital home that included child custody. But when he didn't get what he wanted with the children, because my children were getting older and they were making their own decisions, then he decided to take me to court for child custody and try to obtain 70% custody and give me 30%. So even when you think you have things planned out, you will typically go through the legal system, because that abusive person is not getting their way. They will drag out the process because of the lack of negotiation. Be prepared for that. Practice self-care, because you're still going to be in a chronic stress situation, because you're going to be concerned for your kids. You're going to be concerned for the amount of money that you are spending on attorneys and the amount of time that it's taking to settle your cases. I always tell people to interview at least 3 attorneys if you financially can, because you need someone that has done a number of high conflict cases and they're not afraid to litigate. You want to be able to box this abusive person in. They're not afraid of attorneys, but if you have a really good litigator that's not afraid of court, you can box in the abusive person and get to an agreement that is agreeable to you and to the abuser. So there's a lot of things that you can do. We always talk about strategizing as high conflict divorce coaches, and it's on a case-by-case basis, but definitely look to have your case drawn out because of the power and control dynamic. have your kids being used by pawns, and also the whole co-parenting thing. They don't co-parent, they counter-parent. So I always recommend parallel parenting, which is you parent your kids when they're with you and the other parent parents them when they're with them, so that you don't have to do a lot of communication with the other parent, which just is going to muddy the waters because they're never going to agree with anything that you suggest,
Wow.
which just frustrates you in the process.
So such great, wise counsel that you provided during the time that we've been here together. I appreciate that. So if somebody's watching right now and they go, I think I'm beginning to realize I'm in an abusive relationship, or they're like, I'm about to get a divorce and I want to make sure that I don't enter the divorce arena the way the marriage has gone. I want to have it a different thing. How do they reach out to you? How can you what should they do, or what should they know, so that they can, I don't want to say take control, but they can guide it to be hopefully the most positive experience as opposed to the least positive experience?
Yes, they can reach out to me on my website, which is surthrivetribe.com. So it's the word survivor and the word thriver pushed together to make Sir Thrive, and then tribe.com. And you can email me. I believe I also have a link on my website where you can book a 15-minute session with me, and we can talk about my services and talk about, there's things that you can do before you even hire an attorney, which is documentation. Documentation is how you get through the legal process. I have templates that help you document, but I can also walk you through the easiest way to document for your legal documentation.
And they really do appreciate that. If somebody comes in with a stack of notes and the other person doesn't have any notes, they tend to appreciate the person who brought the notes because they know that the person is doing their diligence.
Yes.
To record, what they needed to record. Now, I'm going to maybe throw a wrench into this, and I don't mean to, but there would also be those people who could try and game the system by saying they were in an abusive relationship when they aren't.
Correct.
I mean, in other words, they're the abuser, and they're trying to make the other person look like they're wrong.
And that does occur. Yes. Someone such as myself, and there are a number of high conflict divorce coaches out there. I work with a number of them. We can recognize the signs because we know the signs of abuse. So we can typically tell when a client is coming to us and they are exhibiting signs of being the actual abuser, just based on their behaviors and the things that they say.
But it's good to know. I mean, because all things being equal, you want the best representative, to pursue a legitimate claim and not. I mean, this is so. I guess where I'm getting tongue tied on this is it's so intricate. There's so many moving parts. There's so many dynamics that need to kind of be unfettered and pulled apart that. For a person to get clear and to get clarity and to know, that they can move ahead. But in addition to all of that, what you provide is to let people know that there's a way through this. There's a way out of being into.
There's a way out. Once you know and understand the abusive person's playbook, then we can counteract it, right? Because to no one's surprise, they all behave the same. Especially when it comes to the legal realm, they all do the same things. I can tell my client, okay, well, he's going to do this next, or she's going to do this next. And 2 weeks later, they do exactly what I said they were going to do. And my client says, how did you know? I said, they all behave the same. They know what the tools are in family court, and they know how to use them. They all do the same things. That's why we prepare you as coaches for these things so that you're ready to battle back when these things hit you.
No, that's excellent. That is absolutely excellent. And the other thing is in the two things, I work in the domain of brain and whole brain learning and accelerated learning, things like that. And so, the argument is the brain that can only do two things. One is it can help you survive and it can help you thrive. That's the only two purposes it has. Keep you alive and then make your life so that it's better. And how it does that is a topic for another time. But the point is it keeps you alive, and then it aims you towards having a good life. And the human has to figure that part out. In other words, it's not magic. It isn't. The other side to the thing is that it's based on habit. The brain runs off of habits. It's the wiring. It's the patterns. And recognizing patterns is something some people can get good at because they can get trained and they can learn to recognize patterns, and while others don't. But a rule of thumb is kind of like if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it is a duck. And so when it comes to abusers, whether they're male or female, in court or out of court, the patterns are there. And if you can recognize those patterns, you're going to be ahead of the game.
Correct. Recognize and document the patterns. Yeah.
So in your book, do you help people because you journaled and because you chronicled and because you did it? You said there are red flags. So people read your book, they can go, okay, here's something I need to pay attention to, and they can look and assess. How do they assess so that if they aren't in the relationship, but they think they might be in the relationship, but it's not really you ever have that kind of thing where people say I'm in an abusive relationship, but it turns out they aren't being abused. They just think they're being abused.
Yes. I actually have a resource section in the back of my book, and it sends you through a series of questions that you can ask yourself so that you can do your own self-assessment. Yeah.
Very good. And then from there, if it's yes, then you can seek help. And if it's no, where do they go? If it's no,
if it's no, I think they need to start looking do a self-assessment, start writing things down, are you looking at things clearly? Speak again. I always recommend a therapist, a pastor, someone that's trained in talking to other people in different situations to see, where you should go. A lot of times, especially people that read my book, it's typically not, no, I'm not being abused, because you're reading my book for a reason, unless you're a family or a friend and you wanted to support me. But a lot of people that pick up my book, they're reading it for a reason. They have seen signs that they probably didn't want to see, and they need validation.
And again, the title of your book is Was It My Fault? An Abuse Survivor's Story and Guide for Navigating Narcissistic Red Flags.
Correct.
Was it my fault? An abuse survivor's story and guide for navigating narcissistic red flags. And they can get that where?
They can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any online bookstore. It's available in print, Audible, and Kindle.
Awesome. And if they want to reach out to you, they go to SirThriveTribe.com. SirThriveTribe.com.
Yep. Or any of my social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok.
Wow. So in closing, because we're going to have to wrap this up just because of time, but this has been a really valuable hour. I think that people should watch this, and if they know somebody or if they're going through it themselves, they should definitely reach out to you, or they should reach out wherever they can. But I mean, the point is to get the help that they need, but also to share the show, to share this experience with other people so that other people can become aware of it. I always tell people, if you don't know that the shoe that you're wearing is rubbing your ankle, you're going to end up with a blister. But it's not, it's the shoes at fault, but you didn't notice it, and so had you noticed it, you could have done something about it. And so awareness is the key to making change. And if you have to look around, at your circumstances and yourself and the other people and go, I think I'm due for a change here. It's going to start because because you noticed what was going on in your life for the first time, because some people don't.
This is true.
So with that in mind, what would you like to say in parting?
In parting, I would like to say, always trust and believe in yourself and your own abilities. Your past does not dictate your future, and you can thrive in life. You can rebuild, you can thrive, and you can live the life that you've always dreamed of. So never give up hope.
Wow. That's great. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate our time together. I hope that people who are watching will like, subscribe, and leave comments and ask questions and share out this valuable information that Alana Sharps has given us today. So thank you so much for being here, Alana.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
you.
having me.
And thank you for the work that you do with the people who you serve. I mean, that's truly, you know, to be willing to work with people who are in crisis or in conflict is no small task.
It's hard work, but it's a passion of mine because I know that it's needed.
And it is needed, and I thank you for doing that. So thank you so much. We'll say goodbye for now. It won't be forever, but we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So go check her out. Go check out the website. The replay, by the way, is available at Create Your Best Life with Rex at YouTube. It's also available at rexsykestv.com. So either place, you can get the replay, you can share it, you can send it to a friend or a family member or somebody in need. And with that, I need to tell you about my book, which you see behind me. Is Life on Your Terms, Create the Life You Want. And the book is a blueprint for being able to change, being able to own your life and create the kind of life that you want to have and want to live and the kind that you deserve, and to be able to make that happen quicker, more assuredly, with more certainty, and with easy bite by bite, step by step, tiny little pieces that you can add in that are enjoyable, so you don't have to struggle, you don't have to beat yourself up, you don't have to waste time, so that you can get from point A to point Z, so that the journey and the destination are most enjoyable. So Life on Your Terms, Create the Life You Want. When you get that book from Amazon, if you go to my website, and it'll show it here, rexsykes.com/book, and you take your receipt code from Amazon, I will gift you, I will give you a bonus. It's a $497 valued online video training on mastery. And in fact, if you go to Amazon, get the book right now, put in the receipt code, you'll get the training before you ever get the book, sent to you. So it's valuable. It's purposeful. It's designed to help you live your best life ever. So enjoy the book. Enjoy being here. I have another guest coming next week. The show is here. Go back through the library of the shows and check them all out, and watch, because there's something there for you or for a family member, for your child or for your parents. And it's all about transformation. It's all about how do you create the kind of life that you want to live, and include in that life the wealth, the health, the happiness, and the relationships that you can enjoy and that you do deserve. And with that, I'm Rex Sykes. As I always say, if you consider something a problem, it's a problem. If you consider it's a blessing, it's a blessing. So go ahead and celebrate everything. I'm Rex Sykes. I'll see you the next time. Bye for now.